Welcome, how's it going? Today I'm going to show you how to press some flowers, and then in a week and a half or 2 weeks I'll show you some things you can do with them. I picked these in the field at my house, but there are lots of little things blooming. There's buttercups blooming, clover, I picked some clover flower. So whatever you can find, you're going to want to get an adult and go and look for some flowers that you can press. The biggest thing to look for is you don't want anything too thick. So I have a little daisy here, but if you get too thick of a flower head, it's just going to take a very long time to dry and it might get moldy instead of drying out all the way. So find some flowers and then I'll show you what we're going to do with them. All right, so I think it's really fun to press flowers and then make a picture frame or a wall hanging because they're just beautiful and it's a nice way to preserve them. When we are going out to get flowers though, we just want to make sure we're taking what we're going to use because there are a lot of pollinators out there and birds that do need the flowers. So we just want to keep that in mind when we're going out to pick our flowers. Okay, if you have a flower press, that's awesome, you're all set. If you don't have a flower press, I'm going to show you how to press your flowers with some heavier books and cardboard and newspaper and paper towels. Phone books also work really well for this. Mine is very thin, but you can use that in between the heavier books. So I'm going to show you a couple ways to do this. Okay, before we can press our flowers, we need to cut them off the stem. One tip for collecting flowers is it's better to go either first thing in the morning or once the sun has set on an area, so in a shady spot. Don't go when it's hot out, they'll just wilt right away. And if you can, you could put them in a little jar or a vase for a couple of hours before you do them. That just makes sure that they look as nice as possible before we cut them and dry them. All right, if you have a lot of cardboard, if you have a box that you can cut up, you can take a layer of cardboard and then a piece of paper towel, and you're gonna do 2 of those because you're gonna kind of make a sandwich with those. So you can put your flowers onto here and then put it in between, and then you'd put that in between 2 books. You can also do the same thing with newspapers. All right, what you're gonna wanna do for cutting the flowers is snip them as close as you can to the flower head. So cut off as much stem as possible. And you can get a couple cut and then we'll place them onto our paper towel. You can try to do a cluster. The thing right here, all of these buds are going to be too thick, so if you want to do a cluster of a couple, you just want to cut off the thicker buds. And once you have a few of your flowers cut, you're going to set them onto your drying paper, whatever you're going to be using. These ones might end up being a little thick down here. We're going to test them out. The biggest thing is when you are putting flowers on paper is to keep the same thicknesses on the same sheet of paper so that it takes about the same amount of time to dry the whole page. The thinner flowers are going to dry quicker, so you just want to have the same sizes together. One other important note is you want to space your flowers out enough. You don't want them too close because the moisture from the flower is going to go into the surrounding newspaper, paper towel, whatever you have. And so you just want to make sure you spread them out enough that the moisture from one flower isn't going to run into the next flower. Okay, once you have one sheet ready to go, you want to make sure that your flowers are gonna press down in a way that you're gonna like afterwards. So you can kind of push them down a little bit just to make sure nothing is gonna fold over on itself. Because however they get mushed in between, the pages is how they will end up. So you just want to make sure that you like the look of them. Okay, then you're gonna put your second paper on top of them. And once you push it down, don't lift it up again. You're just gonna wanna get your heavy book out and put it right on top. Dictionaries work really well. And after you have this placed, you can, if you have the cardboard, this is an easy way to just slide it out on top of another book, or you can set it on a table. And so we're gonna wanna leave it for at least a week to 2 weeks. So this one is ready to go. Okay, the next style is very similar. You just, if you're using newspaper, you wanna put your book down first, then put your newspaper on top of that. And if you really like the book, you want to make sure you put a thick amount of newspaper because you don't want any of the moisture to get to that book. So then you can get your paper towel down if you're going to use paper towels, and then we'll cut and we'll get our next layer of flowers. Okay, sometimes you might want to keep some of a stem, so that is fine. Obviously the thinner the stem, the better, but you just want to again make sure that you're laying them in a spot that when they get pressed, you'll be happy with how they turn out. Okay, once you have filled up your next paper, we're gonna just make sure our flowers are good to go. Make sure you're on your book all the way, and then you can just put your top paper towel on. And then we're gonna add our next stack of newspaper. And we'll put on our next book. Okay. Okay, so the flowers are obviously really beautiful and they will look nice in a picture afterwards, but it's also nice to sometimes have some greens. So I have some clover that I wanna use the leaves from. And if you have any grasses, those look nice too. There's been some blooming by my house that are actually a pretty little shade here. So I'm gonna keep the grasses a little bit longer. Okay, so we're ready to put our layer on top. This is just a pizza box that I cut up. So with either method, either the newspaper or with the cardboard, you can stack on top of each other in between two books. So I'm just gonna slide, and you wanna keep the pressure on both while you're doing it, just so nothing refolds, and then you just put your book back on top. So you can do maybe one more of those. You wanna make sure that your top book is heavy enough to keep all the layers flat is the biggest thing. So if you don't have a big book to use, you can always use a stack of magazines. I seem to have a lot of magazines at my house, so you can put a big stack of magazines on top also. All right, so I said before the flatter faced flowers will press better. But I do want to give it a shot with these clover and see how they turn out. They're just really pretty, so I want to see what happens. If you had a thick flower, and even with this one, you could cut it in half. So I'll just demonstrate that. So you could cut it in half or cut off the back part just to make it a little less thick, and then put that on there. If you want to keep the little other petals that fall off, you can keep those too, and just those could be decorations on your project when these are all dry. Oh, I hope you were able to find some flowers and get them pressed. And I will be checking on my flowers in about a week and just see how they're doing and see if they're dried out. But it might take up to 2 weeks. And this was just part 1. So part 2, we'll be checking on the flowers and then doing a little project with them. All right, thanks for stopping by and have a great day.